Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in this virtual world. My name is Andrew Maxwell. I'm at the Sun School of Engineering, Toronto, Canada, and I'm delighted to be hosting this session today from Tom de Ruyck. Without further ado, let's get going. Tom joining us today from just outside Ghent in Belgium, one of my favorite cities. I worked there for a couple of years. And we were talking about things that he does. He does a lot of work, presentation, keynotes, work with companies around many areas, including around collaboration, which is my favorite topic. He also, as a pastime, teaches in an MBA program. I do that for a living, so it must be fun to do it as a pastime. Although, as people will, certainly my wife would say, it's more a pastime for me as well. So, welcome in joining us today, and I hope you find the sessions interesting. Tom's managing partner and head of Insight Activation Insights Consulting, and he's going to talk today about consumer collaboration in times of crisis. Welcome, Tom.
Thank you, Andrew, and thanks for the kind introduction. Indeed, consumer collaboration, collaboration as well within organizations in times of crisis. That's the topic I want to discuss with you today. We are in a crisis. I think if you look at it from a health perspective, this is the biggest health crisis since the pandemic of the Spanish flu in 1918, or that ended in 1918. From an economical perspective, it's without a doubt the biggest crisis since World War II. And what is so special about this crisis is that it comes at a moment in time in history where the world is very globalized, and all of a sudden all borders are closed. All of a sudden we have to stay at home in most of the countries around the world. So it's very sudden and it's very drastic. You could think then, what as a business should you do? Is it important as a company, as an organization, to stay in touch with your most important stakeholders, the people that make that you have a business, being your customers and your consumers? Yes, it is. And probably it's more important than ever before to stay in touch with them, to connect with them, to understand what they expect from you. It's one of the things that we did very early on at Insights Consulting. In order to help our clients, we started a global online community with people from around the world in the digital space to connect with them and to understand how the situation from a consumer perspective is evolving in different places and what that means for brands. And one of the things we learned very early on is that it's so important. Consumers really appreciate it that you connect with them, especially in times of crisis. They almost expect it from brands. I have seen this morning that there is even a website online now made by consumers on which you can check if your favorite brand was listening to their consumers during the pandemic, if they did something for their consumers during the pandemic. So it shows that this is a clear expectations from consumers. One of the things we have advised our clients is to use a little framework called pause, play, and fast forward in times of crisis. Pause means that you literally check in on the situation. How are your consumers doing? What are they feeling? What are their new needs? Because there are a lot of new needs as we speak. Then play means you are in an agile way going to come up with new innovations or tweaks to your products and your services to fulfill those new needs. So you adapt your current offering to the new situation. And then finally, play means, well, the world after this crisis, after the global pandemic, will probably look different because there will be new expectations, there will be new behaviors, there will be new ways of thinking. What we have seen in the past couple of months is that people start to question how they did things before. Do we still need to go to work every day, or will we work more from home? Aren't we spending too little time with our families? Aren't we traveling too much? And what's the impact on the global environment? all those kind of questions have popped up. It's like the world had a big kind of global sabbatical and we started to question everything we do. So probably after the crisis, we will do different things. There will be a new kind of expectation that we have to brands, but also to the lives we are living. A couple of nice examples of how brands have paused and played. Here, there's an example from Burger King. They were closed. This is an example from France. They were closed. So they saw that people were longing for their food. So what did they do? They released, let's say, a DIY recipe for their kind of Whopper. So that you can make it at home and still have that kind of Burger King feeling. Do they earn any money from it? No, but they show that they care about their consumers and that they want to offer solutions in this kind of new situation. Then fast forward, so the kind of post-COVID world, what will that look like? Amongst others, we work as we speak for Sony Television and Sony Pictures, because what they expect is that our attitude towards life will have changed to some extent. So the content we expect and what we expect to see in stories and movies and television series will also change. They have seen that, by the way, over the years, that depending on what happens in the world, on the big crises, the big kind of moments in history there are, that has a big impact on the type of stories we want to see when we entertain ourselves. So they try to understand now what is the kind of post-COVID world looking like and what type of stories and entertainment are consumers expecting. So you see that in a moment of crisis, it's so important to be and stay connected with consumers. But how do you do that when you cannot meet them physically? Well, here we saw an acceleration of the digital tools that are now available to connect with consumers. All kinds of apps and online and digital communities. We have our own piece of software that we use for that, but there is so much available right now to connect with consumers, to even see their real lives, to have pictures and movies, to almost be in their homes and follow their lives almost in real time. A lot of brands have seen that this digital way of connecting is not only more speedy, you save a lot of time, you can almost instantly connect with consumers, that it's less costly, it's more cost effective, but also that it brings kind of new insights. Instead of connecting a couple of times throughout the year with consumers, this offers you the possibility for almost the same money to connect 24/7 with consumers. So probably this is something that will stay. Brands that did this have discovered that being close to your consumers pays off, that collaborating with your consumers in the sense that you ask what their needs are, when you have found a solution, you throw it back at them, and you can easily understand what they think of it, that works, and that makes that the business is more successful. So this digital way of 24/7 connection with consumers will, after the crisis, be a keeper. Then, of course, when we have connected with consumers and we have insights, consumer and customer insights, we also need to work with those insights within our companies, within our organizations. Of course, also there, your kind of classical workshop wasn't there anymore because we were all working from home. So how do you turn not only your living room, your home, into a workspace, how do you also turn it into a workshop space? How can you do workshops with many people in a kind of virtual environment? And of course, we know the answer. The answer is using Zoom. The answer is using Teams. But how can you make it as good or even better than your classical workshop where you spend a day or even a few days together to actually turn those insights into new ideas, new concepts, and new innovations? Well, we have experimented with this before the pandemic, but of course, again, there was an acceleration because this was the only way we could work together with the employees of the companies that we are serving to turn those insights into concrete products and actions. What have we seen in terms of advantages of working with digital workshopping to do ideation and concept concepting sessions? Well, the first thing is you can involve many people. And this is really interesting. Normally, when we do a physical workshop, you say, well, we can have 10 people in the room. And it's the top guys and girls of the company that are involved. It's not everyone. Here we can literally say, for this part of the workshop, we will involve more people. For this part of the workshop, we will invite less people. You can even do upfront a kind of session where everyone can give their opinion. And there are many tools out there to almost harvest all the thinking that there is within the organization. The example that you see on the screen is a tool that we have developed, which is a little bit Pinterest-like. And before we do a workshop, in order to harvest all the kind of intelligence there is with the many people in the organization, we ask up to 100 people to give their input. And we summarize that input and take that 10 into a workshop with a smaller group of people, like classical 10 people that you would normally work with. So involving the many people makes that you can count on the collective intelligence and the collective wisdom of the organization. And again, digital tools help with that. The other important thing is you don't have that kind of space and point in time that you need to do the workshop at. Typically, a workshop is a full day or 3 days in a row. Now we can say, because we are freed from those kind of boundaries, we can say a workshop is a little bit on Monday, then we continue on Wednesday, and then on Friday we have the final bit. And in between, people can work individually, we can do iterations with consumers. So this is also freeing us from that kind of classical framework. A workshop is a full day with 10 people in a room. Can be more people for some parts, less people for other parts. We can have split sessions. And one of the advantages we saw is that you can do all kinds of tasks in between workshop moments. One of the things we love to do in order to bring insights to life, so you can say on Monday we have a session where we share the insights. What have we learned from the interaction digitally with consumers? And then in between the session where we share the insights and where we are going to brainstorm on ideas, what can we do with those insights? How can we come up with solutions for the problems that are described in the insights? We can bring the insights to life. We can give all kinds of tasks to executives to step into the shoes of consumers, to do things that consumers would normally do. And one of the things that we did for Unilever is when it was a project around food waste, we asked everyone to look in their own fridges and to look at their own behavior, how they deal with food waste. And there was a clear difference with how, let's say, the senior executives at Unilever were dealing with food waste and the average consumer was dealing with food waste. Because this was such a topic within the organization, they were almost like completely biased. And seeing that the kind of behavior of the average consumer is different from your own behavior made that all of a sudden the insights that we had coming from consumers in their eyes were much more relevant and that they were much more passionate to work with them. Another thing that we see is that the fact that you can split a workshop over different moments in time also allows for consecutive learning and iterative learning. And one of the big things, especially when doing ideation, is it's not anymore that kind of pressure cooker where you need to come up with in an hour with a lot of ideas. We all know that great ideas, you cannot force them to come up at a specific moment in time. Most of us have our best ideas when we are, for example, going for a walk or when we are under the shower. If you have time in between different parts of a brainstorm, you allow for that. You give people time to think and rethink and to come up with better ideas, to improve their own ideas. Another important element, I think, is that we had synchronous and asynchronous moments. We could easily switch between moments where people were working individually and working together but asynchronously on some kind of community-like platform, and moments where in smaller groups we were meeting. And the big moments, the asynchronous moments, you can involve really a lot of people to give in their wisdom, to work individually on tasks and share back with the group. The moments where you are working synchronously are moments where you then bring all that knowledge together, you summarize it, and with a small group, you make decisions on what the next steps will be. So this is really a very interesting way of working because you have those kind of different modes. And working individually is good. We have seen that. We have done multiple experiments where we have seen that there are limitations to brainstorming always in group. There are many experiments out there in the academic world as well, where you see that if you give people an individual task, they can think about it, they can rethink it, you give them time to think, but you let them work on it individually, and only when they are ready to share, they share it with the group, that the overall output and quality of ideas is better than if you do everything with the group. And when it's a group brainstorm and that's your only way, or when you switch between working individually and then sharing back in group and adding on each other's idea, that's a much better way of working. And that's what we can do now in the online space, much easier and much better and more time and cost efficient. And of course, if everything happens digitally, you can log everything. Everything is being digitalized, everything is being archived, which is of course one of the practical issues in brainstorms. Where are those post-its? Where are all those beautiful ideas that we had during that kind of meeting? So not only our digital kind of connection with consumers will be a keeper, I think workshops, much more than before, will also be done digitally. Not only because we save a lot of time and money not traveling, but because of the 5 kind of characteristics and advantages that I just shared. You can create a better workshop because you can spread it across time. You allow people to work in group, but also individually. You can work with a small group, but get the input of a bigger group. You can actually do much more in the digital space than in your classical workshop, which has a lot of limitations. And then the final aspect I want to talk about is creativity, because we just discussed how to do, in times of crisis, consumer collaboration and the importance of digital in that. We just discussed how then to take those insights and turn them into ideas in a kind of digital workshop setting and what the advantages are of that. One of the things I think that are so important in times of crisis, one of the skills, because we talked about tools and ways of working now, but one of the skills is creativity. Creativity is hyper important in times of crisis. It was already a topic around New Year. Companies like LinkedIn, but also articles in Harvard Business Review predicted that creativity would become one of the most important skills in the 20s of this century. But if we look at an analysis of the Boston Consulting Group of the last 4 crises, economical crises, you see that companies that during a crisis can think out of the box, can come up with brave and new ideas, can find new ways and alternative ways of growing the business. In other words, are creative and innovate, are always the ones that come out stronger. They not only outperform their own historical performance if they can do that, but they also beat the competition. So creativity is definitely the top skill of 2020 and beyond. What is now the problem? Well, the problem is that most companies are very effective and efficient, big companies, but one of the things that they don't have is creativity. In most companies, creativity, true and extreme creativity, is really scarce. And you will not find creativity when you work with consumers. This is a model from Forrester. If you have 100 people in the world, 90 of them, 90% of the global population, are just people that are normal consumers. They consume things, but they are not creative to come up with new ideas. 9% of the population is what we can call a curator, somebody who can spot great ideas and execute them. For me, that are the people working in big organizations, because they understand what the 90% of the population wants. They understand what consumers want. They can spot fantastic ideas. They take those fantastic ideas and turn it into products, and they market those products. But the problem is that the true creatives don't work for those big organizations. The people that are really the out-of-the-box thinkers They don't work for big organizations because extremely creative people don't fit within those kind of structures. They are freelancing, they are more artistic, or they live a kind of boring professional life to their standards, but in their free time, they want to use their creativity to do something special. And according to research, there is only 1% of the population, the global population, that is truly creative. So if they don't work for organizations, what should organizations do? Well, they should crowdsource more, and they should look for those extremely creative people, brief them with what they found that consumers are looking for, and those extremely creative people can bring in the ideas. And then the people within the organizations can work with those ideas. We work with ICA, and ICA is a global community of 400,000 of those extremely creative people from all around the world. And why is this working, crowdsourcing? Why have we seen in many studies and experiments that we have done that the ideas coming from crowdsourcing are better in quality and later on in terms of market success than the ideas of people within the company have come up with? Well, it's simple. If you work within a company, if you are experienced with the brand, with the product, with the company, you cannot think out of the box. You have like tunnel vision. If you are inexperienced, if you even not live in the country where the problem comes from, even if you have never heard of the brand or the company, you can think without a box, out of the box. And another thing is, within companies, what they lack in order to be truly creative is diversity. They hire the same type of people. What we need is diversity. Multiple experiments show that if you have a diverse group of people, the quality and the quantity, but especially the quality of your ideas will go up. And last but not least, we make this a global thing. Our studies have shown that 92% of the best ideas that we get from those kind of crowdsourcing contests don't come from the country where the problem is being located. So that means if we work for a company in France, for example, and we try to solve a consumer problem from the French kind of consumer population, the chances are really small that the best creative idea will come from somebody, a creative, a 1%er in France. Chances are really big that it will be somebody from the US or China or Latin America. Why? Again, because they can think out of the box. They maybe even take something that they have seen in their country, in their culture, to apply to a problem on the other hand side of the world. So it's about being able to think out of the box, which is a problem with people working in a company. It's about having that skill of being creative, and it's about having a diverse group of people. That makes that the ideas coming from crowdsourcing are better ideas. It's a skill, it's the size of the group, and it's the diversity of the group that makes that this works. A final thing that makes that this works, because companies have tried crowdsourcing forever, but the problem is that they don't brief the creative people with a problem. They put on their website, bring us great ideas. That doesn't work. Creatives want to solve a problem, a consumer problem. So that's where it all comes together. You are connected with your consumers, you find an insight, you bring that insight to life within your organization, you decide which insights, which problems you want to solve that fit your strategy. Then you are going to brief those problems to the creatives, to the 1%ers. They come up with great ideas, and then again, in a workshop with your employees, with your 9%ers within your company, you're going to turn those ideas into concepts and into products. So the creative people solve consumer problems. What is interesting to see is that during the pandemic, our creatives were even more creative, or they were more active. We have compared our activity rates on our kind of ICA creative community, and the participation is 64% up compared to 2019. So that means that those creatives actually are there and want to solve problems. So we not only saw that consumers want brands to listen, we also see that those creative people are more active and want to solve more problems. As a last slide, couple of slides, and as an example, I want to show you the kind of global crowdsourcing competition we set up ourselves based on the insights we had around COVID-19. So we first did a community, a global community with consumers. There we had a couple of insights. What are the kind of urgent needs that brands should solve? And then we turned that into a briefing for the 1% creative people to come up with ideas. The response was huge. In just a matter of 10 days, we got in more than 100 ideas from around the world. Great ideas, ideas that we can categorize in how can brands help to keep the hygiene at high standards? How can brands help to create that kind of sense of responsibility in society? And how can brands help to keep people healthy and to also take into account the mental well-being of the people around the world during this crisis? One of the winning ideas is this one, and I want to show you as an example how out of the box those people think. And one of the big things during the crisis was e-commerce, and we all started to order more online, but then you have those packages and you want to be sure that those packages that you receive, that they are safe, that there is no COVID-19 virus on it. And we still don't know if it's possible or not, but we want to be sure. So one of our creatives came up with this kind of ingenious idea where you have the bubble wrapper that is in lots of those packages that is disinfectant. So we all love to pop those kind of little bubbles, and if you pop them, it sprays a little bit of antivirus, or at least a kind of liquid that helps you to disinfect the surface that you are gonna touch. So you can clearly see, I think, that those creatives are truly out-of-the-box thinkers. And I want to end with this one. This is the Chinese word for crisis, and it contains two characters. One is signifying danger, and the other one is signifying opportunity. And that's definitely what a crisis is. Never waste a good crisis. I wouldn't say I loved the crisis, but from a kind of experimental perspective, I loved it in the sense that we started to experiment with how can we fully digitally connect with consumers, and the results were very interesting, and probably it will be a keeper to have that kind of 24/7 digital connection with consumers. We started to experiment how can collaboration within an organization to do something with those insights and to turn it into great innovations, how can that go digital as well? And we saw that there were a lot of advantages compared to traditional physical workshops. And then finally, we saw how creatives can help companies in times where creativity is more needed than ever to help those companies to really think out of the box, because that's what needed today. So I think this kind of whole model of doing consumer immersion 24/7, harvesting the wisdom of the crowd within the company, going then to the crowd outside of the company, the creatives, to work with those insights and that wisdom and to turn it into great ideas and bring that back into the organization to turn it into products. That kind of whole flow will be a keeper. And I think more than ever, that whole flow will be done in a digital way, because we have seen that it works and that it has lots of advantages from a time, a cost perspective, but also in terms of the quality of what it can bring. It was a great experience. So this was consumer collaboration, but at large collaboration in times of crisis. I hope you have taken away some interesting aspects, and I'm all ear for questions.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for a great talk. I really enjoyed it. I hope that you might recognize that some of those creative people end up in universities, because it's the only place that they can have the freedom to do things. Not all people at universities are creative, but I think that's why I end up in university. I worked in big companies, and it was very difficult to
be creative. Yeah, absolutely.
We're very short of time for questions, so I hope people, if they have really deep questions, can just send you an email. But I do have one very specific one. there's a concern that as things move much more online, people recognize the advantage, and they have the older people or people that don't have access to, well, let's say just older people for now, may not be as familiar. I mean, I FaceTime with my parents in England every week, etc. And so they are getting comfortable, but they're not immersive in the way that many of you people in your community. If your community or customers are elderly, have you got any ideas on how to reach out to them?
Yeah. I
And by the way,
think
we only
it's
have like 1 minute, so I
yeah,
apologize.
absolutely. I think it's getting a lot better. If there has if there is another advantage to the kind of global pandemic is that now much more people are being able to use those digital tools than ever before. It's like the biggest kind of crash course for people that weren't digital savvy to become it. So that's one. One tip is keep it a little bit more simple. Don't exaggerate in all kind of special features and tools. Keep it simple. If you look at the platforms that we're using, the digital platform, it's not in terms of features they are super advanced. In terms of features, they are pretty simple, and that's, I think, one of the kind of main things you have to keep in mind to be inclusive and to make sure that the many people can use it across all ages.
Thank you so much. And it brings me back to the comment on your hard skills, UX design. If you want to design the interface for elderly people, then make sure you've got elderly people testing it. And don't assume that everyone's as literate as you are if you're
Yep.
a software program. So Tom, thank you so much for your talk. I found it really fascinating. I love the slides. The video and the slides will both be posted online at ISPIM. People can get in touch with you. And thank you so much for your time today. Stay safe and stay well.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure. Thank you.